shadows of Chernobyl. The offer came on a Tuesday. A man in a crisp suit with a briefcase and a smile that didn't reach his eyes sat across from me in a dimly lit cafe. He slid a folder across the table, and inside was a contract with more zeros than I'd ever seen in my life. "One last mission," he said. "Simple. You'll be assisting a team of scientists in Ukraine, investigating the flora and fauna in the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. In and out. A week, tops." I should have said no. I was retired, done with the life of bullets and blood, but the money, it was enough to set me up for life, to finally leave the nightmares behind and start over. So I signed the contract. The team was a mix of scientists and soldiers, each with their own reasons for being there. There was Dr. Koval, the lead scientist, a grizzled man in his 50s with a sharp mind and a sharper tongue. He'd spent his career studying radiation's effects on ecosystems, and Chernobyl was his holy grail. He didn't talk much about his past, but I'd heard rumors, whispers of a family tragedy that had driven him to bury himself in his work. Elena, the botanist, was young and idealistic, with a passion for plants that bordered on obsession. She'd grown up in a small village near the Exclusion Zone and had always been fascinated by the stories of mutated flora. This mission was her chance to prove herself. Then there was Ivan, the youngest soldier in our group. Fresh out of training, he was eager to prove himself, but had a nervous energy that made me uneasy. He joined the military to escape a dead-end town and a father who'd never been satisfied with anything he did. Petrov, another soldier, was a seasoned veteran like me. We'd served together in the past, and I trusted him with my life. He was a man of few words, with a dry sense of humor and a knack for staying calm under pressure. And finally, there was Yuri, the medic. He was quiet and unassuming, with a gentle demeanor that made him popular with the scientists. He'd signed up for the mission to pay off his sister's medical bills, though he never talked about it much. The helicopter dropped us off at the edge of the exclusion zone, the rotors whipping up dust as it lifted off, leaving us in eerie silence. We set up camp in a clearing, the dense forest looming around us like a living wall. The air felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't quite place. The first 2 days were uneventful. The scientists collected samples, took readings, and chattered excitedly about mutations in the local wildlife. I kept my distance, patrolling the perimeter, my rifle slung over my shoulder. The forest was unnaturally quiet. No birds, no rustling leaves, just the occasional creak of branches in the wind. But on the third night, everything changed. It started with the lights. We were sitting around the campfire, eating rations, when Elena pointed to the tree line. "Do you see that?" she whispered. I followed her gaze. Deep in the forest, faint green lights flickered between the trees, like will-o'-the-wisps. They moved in patterns, swirling and darting, almost hypnotic. "Probably bioluminescent fungi," Dr. Koval said, though his voice lacked conviction. I didn't like it. I ordered everyone to stay close to the camp and doubled the watch. But the lights didn't go away. They lingered at the edge of the forest, just out of reach, as if watching us. The next morning, Elena was gone. We searched the camp, calling her name, but there was no sign of her. Her tent was undisturbed, her belongings still inside. It was as if she'd vanished into thin air. "We need to find her," Dr. Koval insisted. "She couldn't have gone far." I didn't argue. We formed a search party and ventured into the forest. The deeper we went, the stranger it became. The trees were twisted, their bark blackened and gnarled, as if scorched by some ancient fire. The ground was carpeted with thick, spongy moss that muffled our footsteps. And the air, it smelled wrong, like rotting vegetation and something metallic. Then we saw the insects. They were massive, the size of small dogs, with iridescent carapaces that shimmered in the dim light. Their mandibles clicked as they scuttled across the forest floor, their compound eyes reflecting our flashlights. Yvonne raised his rifle, but I stopped him. "Don't provoke them," I hissed. "Just keep moving." The plants were even worse. Vines with thorns as long as my fingers coiled around the trees, their tips dripping with a sticky, amber liquid. Flowers the size of dinner plates pulsed faintly, their petals opening and closing like they were breathing. And everywhere the green lights flickered just out of reach. We found Elena's jacket hanging from a low branch, torn and stained with something dark. My stomach churned as I picked it up. "Spread out," I ordered, "but stay within sight of each other." The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees pressing closer, the air growing thicker. I could hear the others calling Elena's name, their voices muffled and distant. And then a scream. It was Ivan. I spun around, my rifle raised, just in time to see him being dragged into the undergrowth by something massive and shadowy. His flashlight tumbled to the ground, casting wild shadows as he disappeared into the darkness. "Ivan!" I shouted, running toward where he'd been. But there was no trace of him, just a trail of broken branches and disturbed moss. The others gathered around me, their faces pale and terrified. "What the hell was that?" one of the scientists stammered. I didn't have an answer. My heart was pounding, my hands gripping my rifle so tightly my knuckles turned white. "We need to get out of here," I said. "Now." But the forest had other plans. We tried to retrace our steps, but the path we'd come down was gone, swallowed by the dense undergrowth. The green lights swirled around us, closer now, almost taunting. The air grew colder, and the silence was broken by faint whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. One by one, the others disappeared. Dr. Koval was next. He'd been walking just ahead of me when he suddenly stopped, his body stiffening. "Do you hear that?" he asked, his voice trembling. Before I could respond, he turned and walked into the trees, as if in a trance. We called after him, but he didn't look back. He just kept walking until the shadows swallowed him whole. Then it was Petrov. He was pulled into the darkness by something with too many legs, his screams echoing through the forest before being abruptly cut off. Yuri, the medic, simply vanished while we weren't looking. And the scientists, they were picked off one by one, their screams echoing through the forest before being abruptly cut off. By the time I stumbled out of the forest, I was alone. I don't know how long I wandered, how many hours or days passed. The forest seemed endless, a labyrinth of twisted trees and glowing lights. But finally, I broke through the tree line and collapsed onto the cold, hard ground. The camp was gone. The helicopter was gone. There was no sign of anyone, no tents, no equipment, nothing. Just an empty clearing and the oppressive silence of the exclusion zone. I don't know what happened to the others. I don't know what dragged them into the shadows or why I was spared. All I know is that the forest, it's alive, and it's hungry. I'm writing this from a small village on the edge of the exclusion zone. The locals won't look me in the eye, and they refuse to speak of what lies within the forest. They just cross themselves and mutter prayers under their breath. At first, I thought it was fear that kept them silent. Now, I think it's something deeper. Respect, maybe, or resignation. They know what's out there, and they know it's better not to ask questions. The money doesn't matter anymore. Nothing does. Every night I see the green lights in my dreams, hear the whispers calling my name, and I know deep down that the forest isn't done with me. It's only a matter of time before it pulls me back in. I could have left. I should have left. The contract was void the moment the team disappeared, and no one came looking for us. Not the company, not the military, not even the scientists' families. It was as if we'd never existed. I could have taken what little money I had and disappeared, started over somewhere far away. But I didn't. I stayed because of the guilt. It eats at me, gnawing at the edges of my mind like a rat in the walls. I was the leader. It was my job to keep them safe, to bring them home. And I failed. Elena, Ivan, Dr. Koval, Petrov, Yuri. They're gone because of me. Because I didn't see the signs, because I didn't listen to that voice in my head telling me to turn back. I see their faces every time I close my eyes. Ivan's wide, terrified stare as he was dragged into the shadows. Dr. Koval's blank expression as he walked into the trees like a man possessed. Petrov's screams, cut short too soon. And Elena, I still hear her voice sometimes, soft and distant, calling my name from the depths of the forest. I stay because I owe them, because I need to know what happened, because maybe, just maybe, there's a way to bring them back. The village is small, just a cluster of weathered wooden houses and dirt roads. The people here are simple, hard-working folk who've lived on the edge of the exclusion zone for generations. They don't ask questions and they don't offer answers. At first, they were wary of me, a stranger with haunted eyes and a story they didn't want to hear. But over time, they accepted me. Maybe they sensed that I wasn't a threat, or maybe they just felt sorry for me. I've made a life here, as much as one can in a place like this. I help with the farming, repair roofs, and chop firewood. It's honest work, the kind that leaves your hands calloused and your mind too tired to dream. I've even started to like it in a way. The simplicity of it, the routine. For the first time in my life, I feel like I belong somewhere. But the forest is always there, looming in the distance like a dark cloud. The villagers don't talk about it, but I see the way they glance toward the tree line, the way they cross themselves when they think no one's looking. They know what's out there, and they know it's better not to ask questions. The whispers haven't stopped. If anything, they've grown louder. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, a side effect of the guilt and the trauma. But now I'm not so sure. I hear them when I'm alone, late at night or early in the morning, when the world is still and quiet. They're faint, almost imperceptible, but they're there, and they're calling my name. Sometimes I think about going back, not to the camp. There's nothing left there but ashes and memories, but deeper, into the heart of the forest, to find out what happened to the others, to confront whatever's out there. But I'm afraid, not of dying. I've faced death enough times to know it's not the worst thing that can happen to a man. No, I'm afraid of what I might find, of what might find me. The truth is, I don't know why I'm still here. Maybe it's guilt, maybe it's curiosity, or maybe it's something else, something I can't quite put into words. All I know is that the forest isn't done with me, and until it is, I can't leave. The villagers say the forest is alive. They say it remembers. They say it hungers. I don't know if I believe them, but I've seen enough to know that there are things in this world that can't be explained, things that shouldn't exist, and whatever's out there, in the shadows of Chernobyl, it's one of them. So I stay, I wait, and I listen, because sooner or later the forest will call, and when it does, I'll have to answer.